Hello, ladies and gentlemen and non-binary pals. This is another Metroid Fusion tournament. We got vanilla going on here with some any percent. I hope y'all are excited. Speedgaming Live 2023 coming at you. Online portion is scheduled to go on from, well, last month until October, so we're pretty excited for this tournament to get rolling, and it looks like we're off. So Metroid Fusion is a really fun speed game. There is a lot of text, and as a result, a lot of players have migrated to the Japanese version, which has quite a few differences. Notably, you'll notice that the text is in Japanese. That's a pretty significant difference. Though, so that's going to save a few minutes over the course of the run. But there are some drawbacks. The English version actually came out before the Japanese version, surprisingly for a Nintendo game. But they chose to release this in the U.S. In, I believe, internationally as well. But they delayed for Japan. It was released in November 2002, and then released in Japan in February 2003, I believe. So as a result, the English version actually has some out of bounds shenaniganry that could be used, but we're opting to use the Japanese version for this, so we're pretty much just going relatively glitchless. There are several tricks, several like minor exploits that you'd be hard pressed to consider even like a glitch, and we'll be coming up to them around the first boss. But until then, you just gotta optimize your climbing up shafts and speeding through text. It's going through text is really tricky because in a lot of games you just hold the button and the text scrolls by faster. But in this game, not only do you have to wait to press and hold a button until the text starts appearing, but you also have to use a different input to clear the text once it reaches the end of the line. So like once it reaches the end, you either press a different button or you release and repress the same button. And then after that, you have to release and press a button again to fast scroll the next dialog box. So that's a bit of a pain, and that'll make a couple of seconds of difference between players. But for the most part, it's mostly movement that's going to be a big factor here. And you may have noticed earlier some jumping through doors, which is totally intentional. We'll get to that later because we got some missiles now. Missiles are pretty straightforward. You just hold the R button to prep them, and then press the fire button to fire them. Your original this first missile upgrade you get has a really fast refire rate. We're coming up on a door here. You're noticing Shmayd right now is what Shmayd is gonna do is he's gonna be kind of jumping in the air just a few tiles away from the door. This is Ghidorah in the Metroid universe, and it is going to allow them to simultaneously fire and respin. You saw right there, it actually took 2 volleys of missiles to take out the door. It actually takes 3 missiles to kill the door. But what happened was, because Shmayd fired and respinned on the same frame, the point of origin of the missile came from the bottom back of Samus's sprite, which is why they jumped in the air first. So that first missile came from basically behind Samus, and the second missile was fired in front of Samus. And because there's an acceleration period with the missiles, the first missile catches up to the second missile at about the same time, if not the exact same time, that it hits the eye. And they both hit on the same frame or consecutive frames, and that's enough to hit with both missiles and do double damage. And now they got through Arachnus now, and they did kind of a similar thing with the core. It's a bit different with the cores. It's significantly easier, actually, because all you have to do, because the cores, even though they're round, they have rectangular hitboxes. As they fly by, they're basically flinging a wall at you, a wall of hitbox that you could just set up some missiles to just for the core to collide into it. Hitting them both on the same frame allows it to do double damage, and that's pretty much how that operates. It's kind of nice because whenever you hit bosses, there is typically some invulnerability period. At least with cores and idors and whatnot, like they'll be invulnerable for like 3 seconds, and you'll have to wait that out. But if you hit with 2 missiles in the same frame, then it's all good. You basically skip around. I'm a little surprised Pinecone didn't opt to pick up a missile coming up here. I don't think it's gonna hurt them so much, but that's a very quick missile to grab, and they have an opportunity to grab it later on. It might be like a fraction of a second faster to pick it up later on. I'm not really sure, but that's the option they chose. Ultimately, you kind of want like 45 missile capacity. Each missile capacity upgrade gives you 5. So they're on their way into Sector 1. It's not going to be such a big deal for Sector 1. Even if you don't pick up any expansions, it is viable to get through all of Sector 1 managing your missiles. As long as you stay full on health, you can guarantee that all of the refills that you're going to find from the X dropping are going to be missile refills. Oh, I haven't seen that. Just crouching on the ledge to hit that stabilizer. I guess it depends on what cycle they're on when you're entering the room. That's neat to see. And coming down this pirate shaft here is pretty tricky because you fall just like almost as fast as your missiles, and because your missiles are firing from where your arm cannon is, your feet tend to hit the pirates before you get to them. So one trick people do is that they morph in midair, which resets their momentum and allows them to slow down before their missiles so that they hit the pirates before their feet do. And Pinecone opted to take a safety E-tank. This is pretty smart. Just make sure you finish your run is always nice. We're coming up on another eye door here. It's possible to do the same thing with this eye door, standing a ways back and then jumping and simultaneously respinning and firing. This one's particularly difficult because, as you see, there's a ledge. There's just very little space right here, so Shmayd is standing on the very, very edge of that ledge and does manage to get a double. And they're trying to do a similar thing. They actually managed to get 2 doubles on that charge core. That takes 4 missiles to defeat, and it only took Shmayd 2 rounds to dispatch it. Very nicely done. Pinecone wrestling with some pirates coming up this shaft. I noticed they are out of missiles now, and that's not the end of the world. They can farm some missile refills on the way there, and now they're out of enemies, so they'll have to take a bit of a detour. There's a room underneath this eye door with some hornodes that just infinitely respawn. Unfortunately, they weren't full on health, so they just wound up getting a random health drop. But now 6 missiles is easily plenty with some insurance missiles to boot. Interesting. Pinecone is opting for this missile. It's a pretty lengthy missile to get, but when you're low on missiles, it's not so bad. So this stabilizer, typically you're expected to go all the way around under a morph ball tunnel to the left and then cycle around, shoot out the wall, and then hit the stabilizer from there. But conveniently, since you can just pass through enemy hitboxes if you're invulnerable, you just take some damage and then you go straight into its hitbox and fire the shot once you're inside. And it does just as well as finding the opening from outside. Actually, it does even better because there's a mechanic with the charge beam where the beam is actually split into 2 pieces. So the charge beam looks like one continuous beam, but it's actually a top half and a bottom half, basically. And each half of that beam will do 10 damage each. And on top of that, when you fire the beam, it releases a flare that surrounds your gun. And that flare does 6 damage, and that will add up to a total of 26 damage. Whereas whereas a lot of things like the stabilizers and the eye doors, which are basically the only things I'm thinking of, I guess that constitutes a lot. But those have 25 HP, so you can dispatch them in a single shot now with the charge beam. And that's why that last stabilizer they could have gotten it earlier, but they were able to save missiles because of how powerful the charge beam is. And missile management is not that tight in Sector 1, but it can be if you're just getting unlucky or you just flub a little bit and you take a couple hits and you get bad luck with which kinds of drops you get. So we're now heading on into Sector 2. Shmayd getting their bombs. A very, despite the name, they are very utility-like. That's a word. Yeah, they allow Samus to propel herself in the air. and as well as destroying some terrain that allows her to progress. It does damage, but it's not very much damage. And it's just really not worth using for combat. It doesn't affect bosses anyway. I think it affects Arachnus, but you don't have bombs at that point, so. Another safety tank here in Sector 2. Not strictly required, but nice to have. Here we have Zazabi, a notorious boss in Metroid Fusion, wherein to beat this boss, you wait for it to open. Not a very popular boss design among speedrunners, but hey, it works well enough for casual gameplay. It was actually pretty good luck for Shmayd. The boss can just stay, can just jump far across you and just not open up for several rounds. You're gonna notice here, Shmayd is gonna jump through this next door, and this actually, by doing so, it saves half a second just from the screen having to scroll into position to load the next room. As it's loading the next room. And that's probably the biggest door fixing, as we call it, in the game. And that was a pretty nice setup. Shmayd actually pulls off a SAX skip in Sector 2. Getting some really clean movement from him. That's actually very difficult to do. It's very tight. They were using a bit of a setup. Another option instead of a setup is, I don't know if Pinecone's gonna go for this, but they could just face tank a beam, which does 300 damage. Or well, I believe the beam does 100 damage, and then they get hit with a super missile, which unfreezes them, and if done right, it should hit them from behind, and they'll get knocked forward through the SAX. And that super missile does 200 damage, so you're taking 300 damage total. No, wait. Is it 198 for the ice beam? I forget. It does a lot of damage, so you absolutely need 3 E-tanks to pull off the strat. Which I believe is why they opted for getting the energy tank earlier. Kind of like Sector 4. I'm pretty bad at it personally, though. Pretty good strat there from Shmayd, going through with very calculated shots to get through the room and release a charge as they morph to open the door and get through as soon as they could. Because they wanted to be morphed for a bomb in the next room. There's a strat here where they could just do a frame perfect jump across the crumble blocks, but no one really goes for that. Here, Pinecone's coming up on the SAX with their 3 E-tanks. We'll see if they opt to do the damage boost method. It worked. Generally, I think you want to just, like... Generally, you just want to rush toward it, and it should freeze you, like, when you're right next to it. And in that situation, its arm cannon is basically poking through your torso, and that's why it'll... like, because the cannon is... the end of the cannon is positioned behind you, it's gonna hit you from the back, knocking you forward. Making it safer, but what they did works too. That's scary, but hey, they're not dead yet. Another option is just to wait for the SAX to just leave. And that costs... I think it's like a 5-second difference. Maybe 7. I forget. But it's a time sink in exchange for guaranteeing you don't die. Definitely recommended for new and intermediate players. But if you want to go fast... interestingly, actually, if you're a newer player and you're gonna need E-tanks for later parts of the run, since you're picking up E-tanks early on anyway, the face tank method for the SAX is relatively safe. So you might want to use that method when starting out. And then once you whittle down how many E-tanks you're grabbing throughout the run, you can start just waiting for the SAX, which... maybe you're better off just taking 3 tanks early on and sticking with those 3. It's a tough call. But when you're like an advanced runner, you can start implementing the damage list strat that Shmayd showed off, where you just spring ball over its head and very carefully dodge each of the beam shots, which is very difficult to do because the SAX has Spazer. So it's going to be firing a much wider shot, which is really tricky when it's diagonal like that. I forgot to talk about Ceres when Shmayd got there. I was a little distracted. But I could talk about it here. So Ceres has 50 HP, and as you may recall, the charge beam has a pair of 10 damage particles as well as a 6 damage flare. So if you get really good positioning on your shots, really well-timed shots, then you can defeat Ceres's body in 2 shots. Of course, if you kind of mess it up and you manage to only hit with the flare, it can take like 6+ shots. And that's real unfortunate. So this first shot is a pretty easy one. It always starts off with that pattern, and then it's random from there on. I don't know if that second shot was close enough. It seemed to... I don't know, maybe the first shot wasn't perfect. It seemed a little weird. That third shot was 10 damage, because it only hit with half of the beam. That last shot was 16. It's a little awkward. You don't actually see how much damage you're doing. Like, there are no numbers that pop up or anything. You just have to notice that, oh, the boss is dead, so you didn't hit it with that much. Oof. And they're exiting stage right. There's an option to exit stage left from Saris's room, but it's very difficult and probably really bad for the hands. So I've heard that it saves like 4 seconds, but I don't know. It greatly depends on how optimally you do underwater wall jumps, which is probably the closest, or one of the closest things you'll see to a glitch in this in Japanese speedruns. So if anyone is interested in joining the tournament, the signups are still live until tomorrow evening. Basically gonna cut off the signups like at midnight Saturday night, or Saturday morning, Friday evening. At some point, we'll probably cut it off at like Pacific time, just to give a few more hours. But yeah, then the tournament is gonna officially start on the 21st, and players will be able to schedule from there. We're ironing out some details in the room, or in the tournament, such as like what to do about like PC crashes and whatnot. But we'll have those figured out soon. For the most part, the tournament is going to be any percent normal mode on the Japanese version, no memory corruption. There was some other... Oh, I think that was all the main details. A double elimination tournament. Currently, we have 18 entrants. Coming close to another SAX encounter, as well as a big space beach volleyball. That unfortunately is sentient and evil, and we're gonna have to pop. It's a little sad, but that's fine. Samus kind of hates fun anyway. So Shmayd kind of waited for the SAX to take a step. If you get its attention too quickly and you're jumping slightly too high, there's a chance that the SAX can actually just turn and immediately shoot at you, which is kind of slow and a little scary. So making sure it takes a step is good. Pinecone just climbing up past a stretchy there. So once again, getting inside an enemy's hitbox, as well as making full use of that charge beam multiple hitbox, manages to dispatch the beach volleyball in 5 volleys. It can take as little as 4. And making use of the double missile strat, kiting the core to fly into 2 missiles simultaneously with some very routine movement. Jumping through the door to fix that. Now with various these Ice X conveniently will recover 30 health for you instead of doing 90 damage as they did before. So Samus is now immune to brain freeze. Safety save here for Pinecone. This is a pretty dangerous sector. I find myself taking way too much damage. So with the first security robot fight here, you actually have to trigger it by going to the far left of this room here to a point. You have to hit the right side. Basically, if you're looking at the background, the right side of these pillars, the last pillar on the far left side. And that will trigger the fight to start. If you go much further, it'll trigger the earthquake effect, which will notify you that the boss has spawned. But you could just tag the wall and then run back. Takes it down, no problem. Notably, the upgrade they just got was super missiles, which upgrades their missile damage from 10 to 30, which makes them stronger than your charge beam, even with the full double damage plus flare. It allows them to defeat these side hoppers in a single shot rather than having to burn 3 missiles. And Pinecone opting to raise this elevator to get this E-tank up in the ceiling here. It's a little slow, but if you need the safety, it's there. That's better than dying later on. Sector 5's pretty cool. There are some tricks you could do that I don't think you're going to be seeing, at least in most races. Probably not any races. But there's... this is one of the few sectors that has an alternate route that makes use of one of the few what you might consider glitches in the run. Wherein you speed boost through some plants, which is normal functionality, and then you run off of a ledge and you do a frame perfect down input the moment you land, and that will store a shine spark. a little bit further than you ordinarily would be able to, and that gives you just barely enough time to run into the save room and restore your Shine Spark by sparking into another slope. But here we're just going to see Shmayd is just continuing on to the left instead. But there are some cool strats for climbing this room as well, so it's not such a huge loss, I guess. One trick here, as he goes through this door, because he started in a particular position, started running in a particular position, they were able to make use of that door transition to not only instantly charge their beam shot, but also fire it on the very first frame as they entered, which opened the gate. And because they started at a very specific spot, they weren't quite full speed, so they didn't run into the gate. And as soon as they passed through the gate, they got speed boosters, so they were invulnerable to the projectiles. This is a pretty cute room. This is intended to destroy one of the enemies, wait for it to respawn as another enemy, kill that one, and then wait for it to get absorbed by the vine to become another stretchy vine enemy, which you could then freeze and use as a continuous runway to get a speed boost for the next room. I'm always so surprised that, like, every time I think about it, the fact that that is required in this game is kind of mind-blowing. And not only that it's required, but that it doesn't really trip people up. It's something that they think about. It's something they consider doing because they have nothing else they could possibly do. And it's such a small room. It basically it does a great job of teaching some mechanics to the player without actually telling them what to do. And that's basically a stroke of brilliance in game design. It's basically an art of storytelling in a way that you don't really get in other art mediums. Like, you could, in a movie, you could just show someone doing it, but in a video game, there's something special about just making a player think to do that on their own. We got this meltdown going on here. So in this segment in Metroid Fusion, basically we're in a space station, and there are all these sectors, and there's a boiler room, and inside we got someone regulating the temperature of Frankerzy, very popular doggo. And we have to regulate we have to set the temperatures back to normal, and Shmayd does so pretty handily with some very effective double shots on the core, getting their wide beam, which may or may not be the same as Spacer beam. Jury's still out on that. I think the main consensus is that wide beam is spacer beam. It's just been mistranslated or correctly translated, varying. Pretty slick shot there from Shmayd. So you can fire the beam either by you can fire a charge beam either by releasing the shot button or actually by swapping to missiles by tapping R. If you fire the beam, Samus will stop on those monkey bars and will fire straight forward. But if you fire by swapping to missiles, it doesn't actually play any special animation for firing. So Samus will just fire the beam straight forward. Relative to where her arm cannon currently is in her animation. And as a result, if you're just doing so randomly, like you might just get a random height on that shot, and part of the monkey bars may obstruct a shot. But if you're timing it so that you're swinging your arm cannon downward as you fire, that will actually allow the entire shot to travel and hit the enemy and kill it in one shot. Notably, the wide beam is now in 3 parts instead of 2. I believe they do 15 damage per part. I'm pretty sure it's 15 damage per part. So they are now significantly stronger than their super missiles. But they take some time to charge. So you can still get more DPS from firing super missiles. Wait, is that true? Actually, I'm not entirely sure. I think that's true. And also, one of the most important segments in video game history is we're going to be saving some animals here. There's a tricky setup there to break that speed block with your back foot as you're running past it, which gives you a little more leeway in charging your Shine Spark to be able to spark up the next room. Basically want to kind of touch the left side of the door frame in the background. And there goes the animals. That was pretty good luck. The animals are actually random, whether like how fast they come out. So generally, you'll get better luck if you don't see one of the Edicoons just running past the door as it's opening. That's kind of frustrating. They can also just randomly stop in place, like when you're waiting for them, and yeah, they could eat up several seconds. So theoretically, the RNG in the game can add up to a few minutes, but realistically, the odds are mostly in your favor, and you'll usually only lose like a minute on average, just due to RNG. Heading on into our second trip to Sector 5. Oh, yeah, we have ice missiles now, that's right. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it is higher DPS to fire missiles. Ice missiles. The ice missiles will add another 10 damage on top of the super missiles. So that's going to be 40 damage total. It'll also freeze enemies. So that's a little bit of a pain if you want to dispatch them quickly, but it will take 2 shots regardless of how much damage you do. So with yellow doors already open, Shmayd is just going straight to the data room and collecting their power bombs, which in theory is a very powerful impact weapon with a high energy heat wave that can evaporate human life instantly. But basically everything on the station is Super Saiyan, so it does, I believe, is it 50 damage per power bomb? I think it's 50 damage per power bomb, which is just a little more, slightly more than their ice missile. But it takes forever to go off, and you can only plant one at a time. Of course, the SAX's power bombs apparently are a little bit nerfed, and they only do 20 damage to Samus. But more importantly, these power bombs will open up a few shortcuts, such as this tunnel in the middle of a pillar here, or at the bottom of a pillar here. So they don't have to go all the way up and around. It saves significant time. They also destroy regular bomb blocks, which we'll see a few instances of. So if they need to destroy multiple bomb blocks, they don't have to wait for several bombs to go off one by one, taking with 3-second fuses each. They could just drop a power bomb, which has a much longer fuse, but is still has a very wide area of effect. Pinecone rescuing their Frankerzy. So yeah, Ridley is just chilling on the station, literally. Now is dead. Basically, the Federation opted to clone Ridley again. Spoilers, other M has Ridley and stuff, and it turns out Ridley is part Furby. But yeah, they like to clone their enemies and let them wreak havoc on themselves. There's something about human psychology that sometimes just doesn't really make sense. But yeah, thankfully Ridley has been dispatched. However, unfortunately, it's been made into a mutated version that is significantly stronger. So hopefully we'll never have to see that. We'll just complete our objective and just get out of here. So Shmayd is coming up on the space station's pet spider, named Yakuza, which has 6 legs. It's not entirely clear if it's because the spider was mutated into an insect or if it originally had 8 legs and had to release a couple of them. A lot of spiders have the ability to detach their legs in an emergency. So they only get 2 rounds here, but they're able to very rapidly wiggle out of the mandibles of the spider, and that's faster than actually dodging it. Because it's closer to the top when you get caught. Pretty clean fight overall. It's possible to do a similar kind of strategy with the second phase of Yakuza when it's space jumping around without legs. You can fire 2 missiles straight up in the air, creating effectively a wall for Yakuza to fly into. Unfortunately, you can't really affect... You can't easily manipulate Yakuza into certain patterns. It's just kind of random. It's based off your position, but that's... And maybe it's not based off your position. It's probably just based off the time it jumps. But it's effectively not predictable where Yakuza is going to go. So you just kind of fire up in the air and just kind of hope. A neat strat there is to place a bomb in the tunnel to get the SAX's attention, and then space jump over it to make it just fire and miss you. So that you don't have to jump over it later on. It's like barely faster. You could also just opt to not bomb it and just go straight through and freeze it and jump over it. I think it's less than a second difference. But gotta go fast, right? Unfortunately, space jump is the worst item in the game. Similar to Super Metroid, in order to space jump, you have to be in the air, spinning, and have fallen for several frames. I estimate that you have to fall for about a tile, maybe a tile and a half, just to be safe. Maybe 2 tiles. I don't know. I haven't looked at the frame data, but it's a pain. It's so common to actually just press the jump button, but you didn't wait long enough, so it doesn't count. Although it is a step up from Super Metroid, wherein in Super Metroid, if you press it too early and you don't recognize it in time, you're gonna miss a window of opportunity where you're allowed to space jump, and like once you fall too far, it'll just not let you space jump again. In the GBA Metroids, it just lets you space jump any time after that. I want to say 10 frame waiting period. So now with the plasma beam, Shmayd's damage output goes from 15 damage per part of the beam, the charge beam, to I believe it's 11. I think it's 11 damage per part per frame, maybe 12. I forget. It might be 10. And because it's per frame, and generally enemies will be vulnerable on every frame. It's going to rack up damage very, very quickly. So when you were doing 45 before, now you're doing like 30 something, multiplied by how long it's in their sprite. It's still good for small enemies, but especially for bigger enemies, it can do hundreds of damage. A really tight attempt to charge a Shine Spark in that room. You only have like 1 or 2 pixels of leeway to get a speed boost in that room. Nice use of R-Shot. Actually, I guess it technically wasn't necessary. There's some quirkiness with the physics of being underwater, where if you're because you're falling so slowly, you almost immediately reach terminal velocity underwater. So if you release a shot, or when you're spinning, it kind of shrinks your hitbox. And I believe it kind of shrinks your hitbox down, like on the bottom of your sprite when you're in the air. But when you unspin, it shrinks your hitbox down from your head. So you're basically shoving yourself down the water, and the tool-assisted speedrun will actually make use of this and just rapidly spin and unspin to reach the bottom a little bit faster. But that's kind of not really viable for human gameplay. I try it once in a while, and effectively it's a zero sum. So just pump Nightmare full of missiles. You have so many missiles because you were farming all those missiles to deal with Notori, the plant boss from before, because the missiles are higher DPS than charging the shot. And it just works out that the time it takes to acquire that many missiles is made up for by the higher DPS against the Notori fight. And so because you have missiles already, it makes Nightmare significantly easier, since you could just hammer away with missiles and not even worry about your health. You just out damage them. You could survive like 5 hugs or something from Nightmare. You only need 1 or 2. This place gets a lot of casual players tripped up because a lot of old school Metroid players, a lot of Super Metroid players especially, will be familiar with an infamous tube, and that kind of comes back into play here, where you lay a power bomb in a tube and you discover that part of the tube is breakable with bombs. You could use regular bombs as well in this instance, but you also have to use missiles to destroy another layer. Once again, space jump being the worst item in the game here. Incidentally, but not quite ironically, I prefer it in Metroid Prime, even though it you only get one extra jump out of it. You can use that jump at pretty much any time. Although, in that case, I believe it does also disable space jumping if you fall too far. But it's a pretty wide time frame. So one of the more noticeable version differences is here in this room on Shmayd's screen that they just went through. There are a couple of POW amps, these little things that puff up when you get near them, and they're inside these morph ball tunnels. And on the US version and European versions, there are 3 tunnels there, and the POW amps are positioned a little bit differently. And on that version, you could actually kind of do an exploit where you can freeze those puffers, those POW amps, with a regular ice missile. You don't need diffusion to get past them. However, once you get to the navigation room, it plays this Easter egg message where it tells you about, where it praises you for your Shine Spark skills, because the that secret message is supposed to only be acquirable through a series of very difficult Shine Spark chains. But because you're getting the secret message and not the actual mission objective message, the event flag isn't going to increment, and you're not going to be able to progress and leave the sector. So you have to actually get diffusion missiles to advance. Even though they're not only skippable, but not necessary for anything in the game. Well, actually, they might be necessary for an E-tank. Maybe. They're a little bit helpful. They do add damage, however. They add another 5 damage, so their missile damage is up to 45. Technically, the flakes that shoot out around it can do an extra single damage as it freezes enemies. But I don't think that applies when it's frozen from the missile itself. And it's only a single damage anyway, so whatevs. So here we have box 2, or Xbox, as it has now been confirmed infected by the X parasite. We destroyed the body, now we have to deal with the mind, which, interestingly, minds and bodies seem to be different organisms that have their own unique functions. And even have their own little universes to their own physics to deal with. So there are a lot of ways to stay cool in the summertime. One of them I would not recommend is getting shot with an ice missile. It seems to be not so bad for like someone in a Chozo power suit, but barring that, you're probably just going to be fine. Just having Variosuit to regulate the temperature in your suit in general. You don't need the ice missiles to just cover you in freezing cold. And it's not really gonna make much difference anyway, because the Variosuit is just gonna regulate the temperature anyway. So something that can sometimes be overlooked by especially newer speedrunners is that those monologues, whenever you're on an elevator, can also be sped up by holding the A button. I don't think it works with other buttons. Okay. Pinecone does get through the plasma core fight. Gets her plasma beam. Unfortunate that the cores only give 400 HP recovery. Not quite a full health refill. I believe the red X actually gives you 500. That's kind of interesting. If you're really scared, there's actually a hidden recharge room in the middle of that previous shaft. If you just morph and roll into the wall. It's just a hidden tunnel inside. It's a really... It's an odd place to put a recharge room. It's so extremely hidden. It feels like there should be some kind of visual cue, as well as like a missile tank or power bomb tank or something down there. But no, it's just a recharge room that you just don't need and won't find. So Ridley is a special case wherein it's vulnerable to not only the charge beam, but also won't immediately destroy the beam as it's passing through. In the case of Nightmare, they were using missiles because their decreased damage output, even though it does damage per frame, the beam gets immediately destroyed by the shell of the Nightmare as soon as it makes contact with the face. So it's actually only doing it's doing even less than you would do with just the wide beam, the wide charge beam. But on Ridley, not only does Ridley's body not destroy the plasma beam, although the plasma wave beam, although the tail still does, you can deal damage per frame on Ridley, and because it has such a massive hitbox, you could do as much damage as like mid 700s per shot, which is significantly more than 45 per shot with the missiles. I'll occasionally see like walkthroughs or like other players recommending, oh, just spam missiles and you're gonna kill it. And technically that's true, but it's gonna take a lot longer and you're gonna take like twice as much damage. Of course, it actually varies depending on whether you use a diagonal shot to get that square root of 2 length of its hitbox to travel through. or if you like use a straight up shot, and at which point it'll depend on whether Ridley's bobbing up or down as you shoot, or just being stationary. So you'll get variable damage, but you'll still reliably get several hundred damage per shot, unless you're hitting the tail. It's a bit tricky when Ridley turns around as you shoot, because sometimes the tail does block. Those pinecones turn to face tank against Nightmare. Really easy strat. Just sit there on the ladder, straight across from his face, and fire. Takes basically 2 rounds of volleys of shots. And it's gone. Another minor thing I haven't mentioned is when you destroy Core X's, in order to collect the upgrade that they possess, you have to jump into it as it's like in position, and that position varies from room to room, but effectively it's like as you destroy it, it's going to slowly wiggle towards that position, and you're unable to collect it until it reaches that point. So what most speedrunners do is they'll try to destroy the core in a specific position so that as soon as they destroy it, they're able to collect it. And you'll often see on the higher level speedruns that as they're collecting it during that freeze frame, parts of the shell of the core are still just on the screen. Haven't quite fallen off yet. So yeah, more of that plasma beam continuous damage. The wave beam does increase it up to, I want to say 11 damage per frame. I think ice beam does 12 damage per frame, per part. Oh yeah, there's a really tricky strategy with the SAX in Samus form, where typically it'll be invulnerable as soon as it's hit. So the plasma beam effect isn't very effective. However, if it's frozen, it doesn't get those iframes. So you're actually doing a lot more damage if you freeze it and then shoot it as soon as you can with a few frames of leeway. And you can fire a missile immediately after and just keep it stun locked effectively. It's very difficult if it kind of... It can get dicey if you make a mistake. And then you'll have to fight it on the lower level, and then your timing is a little bit wonky, and you might only have a frame or two to refreeze it. And if you don't freeze it quite in time, it's going to fire at you and just ruin your stun lock. But there are some ways to deal with that as well. Ideally, you just nail the stun lock first try. And on this Omega Metroid, Shmayd is setting up to stand in a very specific position to shoot straight up through the Omega Metroid, because its head and its lower body and its claw all have hitboxes that destroy the beam instantly. So by shooting straight up in a specific position, the majority of the beam, 2 parts of the 3 of the beam are going to stay in its hitbox significantly longer. Whereas with diagonal shots, you can also stun lock it to death, but the middle is going to the middle of the beam is going to pierce through into the back if you're standing in the right position, which is a little bit less damage than the up strat, where you have 2 beams. Even though it's fewer frames, it's twice as much per frame. And I think it's like 3 seconds faster than diagonal strat. It's a couple seconds faster than it. It's just a lot more precise. So GG's to Shmayd. Getting a sub 115, very solid showing. So they have a kind of a different setup from other players. Shmayd unfortunately kind of struggles with having race time open, so they haven't hit done yet, but that's okay. Not really sure if they're going to be joining for post-race interview. In the tournament setting, because they're kind of unable to actually load race time, they're unable to load their browser while they're streaming or while they're actively running. We're probably just going to retime them. We'll see how things go. We're not entirely sure if they're going to join the tournament. They're debating because of their technical difficulties. Got Pinecone dispatching the Xbox, getting their wave beam. There's a funny quirk with the music. If you finish the fight, I guess it's on a certain frame. I guess the fight can continue. The fight music can continue playing after you pick up the item. And welcome on in, Shmayd. A very solid run, sub 115.
Yeah,
very nice.
That was actually my best pace in power bombs by 8 seconds.
Nice.
And then I got absolutely bodied by luck. I think at the end that was 13 beams total, I want to say. Which is...
Yeah, it's about average. A little bit lower than average, right?
Yeah, in the last 5 doors, though. So, like, it started really good luck. Like, I don't usually get really good luck in my runs, so that was a good change.
Yeah, but I thought that that Zazabi was pretty good luck and only 2 rounds for Yakuza.
Yeah, for definite. But I got 3 beams at Yakuza. I think another 2 at Notori, and I got my first. I've run this game. I've had 1,000 attempts, 109 attempts. I've never had 4 beams at Nightmare up until now. That was my first time getting 4 beam Nightmare. So that was fun.
Yeah.
And what hasn't happened is I reopened race time. So let's play some. So that run has just died. So I'll probably retime that unless.
Oh, yeah, that'll be fine. I'm not worried about that. That's you got a sub 115.
Oh yeah, that's my best.
Saw it. We watched it.
That's my best race run by over a minute. Nearly a minute, sorry.
Nice.
So that's a.
And you still you still got second place anyway. So
I was told I was ahead of Orc hits that were bench juiced for like vast majority of the run up until like end game when I got Nightmare Spark was my fault. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
But getting 4 beams at that just killed any chance of this run being anything at that point. I got my
Could have
plasma
gone for the space boost.
Yeah, but when I shoot space boosters, I lose it in like one of the second or third rooms, like the data room, or like the room.
Yeah, well, to be fair, that's just because it's really hard.
Like I did mess up the backup. I completely misjudged where I was supposed to store the spark, but that was just my fault. I tried to jump with a muscle memory as though I did a quick stand up with upright. I didn't press upright, so I just sparked straight forward. Which
that space boost I'm gonna be really excited to commentate on during the tournament. I know a couple players actually go for it, and a couple players can actually get it. So.
Like Scotty just goes for it, and it's like, this is not as easy as it looks.
Yeah, it's so difficult because like it saves a few seconds. But.
3?
Yeah, something like that.
That's actually significant.
The key thing is that although technically the Shine Spark is a faster movement speed than the Space Boost, because the Shine Spark has a startup and a bonk animation at the end, and the Space Boost is capable of dropping below where the Shine Spark would end and just carrying it through to another entire room. That winds up more than making up for the slower speed. And it's just extremely difficult because the doors are set up in such a way that I guess because they're like broken door, like just like edge of screen transitions, the programmers decided that they were just going to teleport Samus to a vertical position on the floor. So in order to go through doors with a space boost, you have to be rising up and holding jump to continue your boost.
Ideally, you do that kind of lower into the door, but that's also really awkward to set up. Keeping yourself that low with space jump in this game is pretty awkward.
Yeah, and I was commentating.
This game is kind of notoriously not easy.
Yeah, I was saying space jump is the worst item in the game.
Dude, I had so many issues with space jump in this run.
A lot of Super Metroid players had it as well.
Like, you probably noticed a lot of times I was having problems with space jump in this run.
That's because of space jump. Yeah. Unfortunately, Pinecone's hitting a bunch of rippers on the way. It's technically better if you don't hit any of the rippers, not because it's faster or anything. It's just like, it's
lag. I'd assume.
No, just morally. You just murder is bad. You want to save animals.
Oh, pacifist. Yeah, you don't wanna.
Yeah, it's not faster at all. It's just better.
Don't do anything. They're just there to. They can make a platform for you.
Some people may disagree, but save the animals.
I could also save them. Yeah, that was a good run. It's a shame that the rejoining race times had pressed .done. Completely botched my splits. I did not get a 118. But yeah, that's my second time getting a 47 in a race, and definitely my first time with 114 in a race. I got
Nice.
I actually got my first 46 like a couple of days ago. So to get another 114 straight afterwards, and actually have a pace throughout the run that was better for most of it. It was really good to get it. Yeah. Sure, it died very dramatically, but oh well, that happens. I can't beat myself up over it. I know what I can do. I know what I want to get. So I view it. Yeah. Benched with a. I was only 40 seconds off a bench with the luck I had at endgame. I want to compare my blitz with his. I'll have to retime it, obviously, but see if he saved his anywhere. It was a really good run. I can just go back into VOD. Forgot about that. I'll go back into my VOD and get my splits from there. Don't have to retime it if I do that. But I would like it to see what it does to my average, because I should be 114 average now. It's kind of crazy. I didn't think I'd ever have that.
That's really good. I remember back when I was pretending to be good at the game, I would, I knew at some point, I was just gonna play the game often enough to do a single segment low percent. It was just gonna happen. I wasn't gonna try to get it. It was just gonna happen because I played so much.
Yeah. It's like...
I kind of felt the same. It's just suddenly you're just getting these good times.
I actually golded in that run as well. Supers.
Nice.
Got my best supers pace as well. So I got my best supers pace by 3 seconds, best ice missiles pace by 4 seconds. Oh my god, 3907 wide beam. That's 5 seconds. Power bomb's 8 seconds, and then it all fell apart. This run started such a mess. I'm surprised I actually managed to play as well as I did. Oh my god. My power bombs didn't gold because of the animals luck.
Yeah.
That's my longest
that was better than... That was probably close to average luck with the animals. It wasn't terrible, but...
There was one of them which was at the window, started doing its dance animation, and then it went to the right and then to the left. That was probably
okay.
I want to say a 12-ish. I want to say a 12-ish, 13-ish second animals. So that probably lost me a little bit of time, but that was a clean-ish segment. I did botch a bit of 5. The ledge grab especially, but that is my longest lasting gold. I can't gold power bombs. It's so sad. I've tied it again. 634 is my power bombs gold, which isn't fantastic, but I do pick up an extra item in that segment. And I've tied that gold so many times. I got it in February. Now, one day I'll get it. One day.
So far, we have 3 people. We had 5 people in this race. 3 have finished so far. We got Bench Shoes with a 114.16.
Okay.
Shmayd with a... You got what? What was it? 114.56? Okay.
Yes.
And Kaio with a 125.31.
I'm gonna check if... Look, it doesn't look like any of his streams are on. I don't think anyone else is streaming. Their perspective. Pinecone's doing theirs, but that's on the Speedgaming bench.
Yep.
Might still be live, maybe? No, he went off.
Nacho might be live.
Possibly. Oh, let me have a double check.
I think they still need a PB on the for the They don't strictly need a PB, but might as well have a PB going into a tournament.
Yeah, they're not streaming either. I don't know if they would have streamed. But yeah, I don't know if they've finished in a race yet. They've entered a couple, but they've probably died a lot. Weirdly, I didn't die. Was I close to it at any point? I don't even think I was actually close to dying, which makes a change for me in these runs. I die way too much in races.
I was a little sad. I was doing. I've actually never played the Japanese version before.
Oh yeah,
because I'm just so old. But the oh gosh, was it the first one? I got to the SAX and my missiles just didn't come out. There's an issue with my B button. So it's just not registering sometimes, and I missed the stun lock and got it on the ground, and I think it missed a shot again, and I got shot, and I kept getting shot, and I died.
Oh, is that the second Sector 2 entry?
The end of the game. The final SAX.
Oh, the fight.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
yeah, you can't have anything dropping that.
But oh well.
Yeah, let me just screenshot my run because we usually post it.
I was a little 50-50 on whether I was actually wanting to join, but I think this might put it over the edge. Just having a faulty B button is just not fun.
Yeah, I get you. Like running with that is not gonna be good.
I noticed that before with Super Metroid, where like I'm using the other face buttons, and sometimes when I'm pressing Y, for some reason it makes the B button stick. So it just like
really?
Yeah, it makes me like charge my beam or continuously fire if I don't have charge.
Yeah, that's not great.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
There's my screenshot. Let me post that. Oh yeah, I need to check the device. Settings so I don't end up blitzing and making a bunch of fake runs. I keep doing that. I think I broke the run.gg because every time I'm typing, I have with my live split open, it just throws a bunch of fake splits and runs on the site. No.
Yeah, I don't trust live split personally. I feel like it's just a little resource heavy. I'm so old school. I use W split. It's just a very basic timer. It does have splits, but it's not nearly as beefy, and it doesn't have all the fancy tools that live split does. But it is a timer, and I could compare splits, and that's fine for me.
Realistically, all you need is a timer. The splits are optional. Like,
and even then, technically, you don't even need a timer.
Yeah, true. Like, you can just get the time off the board, I guess. Trim it down. Although you would have to still have your reset in, so that's the thing.
Of course, it makes it significantly easier for like people who want to verify tournament results, but
True, yeah.
That's fine.
Nice missile. I'm actually really happy with that running. Looking back on it, sure it was dead in a very sad way, but I actually played really good, considering. Like I started the race and I'm like, dude, I'm getting really tired now because usually the races are late for me. This was nicer because it is not as late as usual, but
I wanted to make sure it was like this kind of time.
Yeah, definitely a bit better. Yeah.
Of course, if anyone didn't join and they're looking to race, I did say technically that that we were going to schedule this race for 5 p.m. I scheduled it for 5 p.m. Eastern, and then I made a timestamp conversion to say 5 p.m. But I'm on Pacific time, so whoops. It was my announcement said the race was 3 hours later than it actually was. So if y'all want to race in another hour, go for it.
I'm probably gonna dip everyone, but it'd be cool to see other people do it.
You don't strictly have to race if you want to join the tournament. Technically, you don't even need a PB, but we would prefer it if you have if you can reliably finish in under 2 hours, which is I don't think is a big ask if you're going to join a tournament. The top players are going to be finishing 114, 113. So
yeah, at least one run. That speaking of that, this tournament, the top 10 is all 114 or faster.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Crazy. There's literally there's seeds in the bottom half of the seeding who have 114s. And that's ridiculous. And it's like I'm 7th seed and I have a 46. Like what the heck? It's so stacked, this tournament.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see how the community develops just having the tournament, because people are just gonna play, and that's just like how
that's
how you get good.
That's generally what I did with this. Was I just played, and I just wanted to play decent enough to for people to enjoy on Speedgaming stream. Like I played in a way that I'm actually really happy with. Considering it was restreamed as well. Like, sure, it's a shame. I keep saying this, but it was a shame to lose the run in the ways it did. But at least I actually played that way in a race for once, because it is. I do prefer having bad RNG at early game. I much prefer running with bad early RNG and then like okay late game. So like. Start with 10 beams and finish on like 16 or something. I much prefer doing that than start with 3 beams, finish on 16. Like, it's just a bit more, it just eases me off a bit more for the run. Yeah, Bench Juice is ridiculous at this game, and I was really close to him for most of it. I don't know how close. I was told I just kept up with him, but it's like that's good because it's a sign of where I want to be.
Nice.
And the fact that I can actually keep up with someone that high up. Like show that I can make it to that point is that's really motivating actually. Like sure it's a race and it's like not as.
And welcome on in Pinecone. I hope you're
Hello Pinecone.
Hope you're doing well. Good job on the race.
Hey, thanks. Good to hear from you both.
Finish.
Yeah, this is a pretty tough game. Like I was playing for a few hours the other day and I just I didn't even finish a run. But yeah.
Game is hard.
Anything you were particularly happy or frustrated with during your run?
Yeah. I'd say it was a pretty frustrating run for me overall. I did get I got some golds in there somehow.
Nice.
Like I had a pretty good Xbox, and the Yakuza kill I did was good, at least good for my standards. I also and the other good thing was I think I either lucked into it or I like accidentally did the like Sector 6 SAX skip really fast. I have to take a look at that, but
nice.
Otherwise I got a lot of rust to shake off before this tournament. I think I'm
yeah,
I'm
that
pretty
was
far behind the crowd.
Sector 2 one as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do the
you got through that
too. That's been going okay for me.
Okay.
Fair few runners who do need to de-rust as well, actually.
So I noticed you skipped one of the missile tanks at the beginning of the game, like right after Arachnus in the little morph ball tunnel. Was it?
Yeah, that was definitely a mistake. That was not like a strat or anything, and it definitely cost me when I had to harvest a few green X for missiles at the end. So that was That's something I gotta fix.
Yeah, that's if you're skipping that missile, it makes Sector 1. Sure, it's like you save 5 seconds, but it makes Sector 1 much more.
Yeah, you could be fine, or you could slip up and take damage and then just only get health drops for the rest of the sector.
Yeah, basically, it kind of just forces you into avoiding damage. Like, yes, there's ways to do that. You can. It's not too hard to avoid damage like that, but you can also get scammed. This game's very known for scamming people, so
yeah.
Sector 1 pirates, especially. I screwed my Sector 1 pirates up, but that missile helped, and also I did actually get some pretty good luck regardless.
Yeah. I think when I realized that I was running low on missiles, I probably should have gone for, like, one of the other tanks in Sector 1 to make up for it, because I'd already taken so much damage. But
there is
either way, I was losing time.
There is the one on the left of the Fed stabilizer. It's a pretty slow one, but it's also a bit of a safety one, just to ensure that you do.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking about, but I just didn't want to wait for the door, I guess.
Yeah. So we are running out of. We're a little short on time. We have a Zelda 1 randomizer thing going on in a few minutes. Any thoughts on the tournament overall? You pretty excited to play?
I'm excited, yeah. I think we could actually do a good run.
Yeah, I can't wait. I've got to de-rust, but it's going to be a real fun time.
Definitely. I'm really glad y'all are joining.
I think every matchup is close, and will get closer. And
so we're going to be ending the sign-ups Friday evening / Saturday morning, kind of like midnight-ish. I think Pacific time. I don't know. Or we'll figure it out. Just give as much time as needed, and then we're going to have to see the races, and we'll have the tournament starting on Sunday. So I'm excited for that. We'll see y'all then.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Take care, y'all. See you next week.